Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Elk Grove Unified School District Virtual College Fair. We're so excited to have you participating in this event. We have some fantastic schools here with us today. My name is Brianna, and I'll be your facilitator. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the schedule on the website, especially the 6x6 format college fair that will be happening directly after these panels. This presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/elk-growth. I'd now like to turn it over to Kathleen Williams with Lafayette College.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Yes, my name is Kathleen Williams. I'm an Associate Dean at Lafayette College in Admissions. I'm happy to be talking to you today. I'm going to share my screen with you. As Brianna said, please, at any time that you have any questions, please put your questions in the Q&A. I'm happy to answer them for you. So without further ado, let me share my screen and talk about paying for college. So I kind of expanded it for paying for college in the second year and beyond, because it's a topic that I think is near and dear to your hearts, right? You're making decisions about college. What does this mean? You may have a scholarship first year, you may have some financial aid, but you're wanting to know, does that continue? Do other people or other schools do the same thing as Lafayette does? And so I want to provide you information and guidance as to how you can continue the college journey for your sons or daughters, because it's an important time and these are important family decisions that need to be made. So again, feel free to ask me any questions in the chat box. So Lafayette College, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to us because it gives you some context as you compare schools and opportunities. So Lafayette College is exactly as it says, it's a college, undergraduate. We're also a school that meets 100% of demonstrated financial need. So we require the CSS Profile and the FAFSA. And like anyone else, you're going to have to fill those out on a yearly basis. But I will talk about that a little bit more. But in the meantime, let's get to the hot topic on how you're going to pay for college for the next number of years. And so schools have financial aid, right? But not all financial aid is created equally. So most schools have you fill out the FAFSA. And by the way, if you are looking at the FAFSA and you find it online and they're charging you, you are in the wrong place. That's a scam. The FAFSA, the F stands for free. So know that it does not cost you anything to fill out the FAFSA. It does cost to fill out the CSS Profile. I think the first school is $35 and after that it's $16. Why is the CSS Profile important if you are a student or a parent in California? Well, this is not going to come as a newsflash to you. California is expensive. I know that. I was a Californian living just up the road from you in Land Park up until 3 years ago when I moved to take the position at Lafayette and moved to Easton, Pennsylvania. So, you don't understand, I think, as a Californian, how expensive California is truly until you leave. So it is a lot more expensive, as is New York and as is New Jersey. So for students in high income earning areas, such as California, New Jersey, and New York, filling out the FAFSA and having a school have you fill out filling out the CSS Profile and being at a school that requires the CSS Profile actually happens to help you in the financial aid process because it takes into account the cost of living. So I think that's really important for you to know when you're looking at schools. Find out if they request and require the CSS Profile. So as I said, Lafayette requires both. And if you are an international student, so not holding a US passport, then we require just the CSS Profile. So how does this work, especially in the time of COVID? Well, the FAFSA changed to prior a few years ago. And what does prior mean? That means that we're using prior tax returns. So instead of waiting for you to have filed your tax returns in April and then making it be a guessing game for financial aid, they changed it. So now the tax returns that are being used, if your son or daughter is starting college in the fall of 21, are the tax returns for 20. Well, 20, as we know, was a very interesting year, right? Most of us were housebound during the pandemic. Some people sadly lost jobs. And so this is a year where there might have been a lot of financial change for you. So definitely know that schools understand this, but they do require the tax returns from 2020. So what are they looking at with regard to financial aid? It should not be a bait and switch for you. What you fill out your very first year as an applicant, your financial aid package should be very similar after that, provided that things haven't changed dramatically. So if you win the lottery, for example, I would say good for you, but you're not going to qualify for financial aid if you've won the lottery the second year. So when you're turning in your tax returns for 21 as part of the process for looking at financial aid, that's going to be taken into consideration and you're not going to get financial aid. Similarly, facts can change, right? The primary breadwinner, who maybe two parents were working in 20 and they're not in 21. So those kinds of things are the reason why every year you have to reapply for financial aid. In addition, the number of children you have in college can impact the financial aid package that you get. So be cognizant of that. If you are somebody who has this year, you're going to have 2 children in college and next year you won't, that will most assuredly impact your financial aid package. And I will talk about, well, what does that mean for paying? But I wanted you to know some of the ins and outs of financial aid first so you can start thinking about that. Also know that almost all schools have the net price calculator on their website so that you can use that net price calculator to figure out what your estimated family contribution would be for any given institution. I want to warn you, however, that if you are self-employed or if you are married, or divorced and remarried, the net price calculator loses some of its accuracy. It's one of the reasons that Lafayette has My Intuition also on our website, and My Intuition takes into account those situations and therefore tends to be quite accurate. And other schools will have that tool as well. But there's lots of ways for you to figure out what it's going to be going forward for you by using those tools. So financial aid at all schools, they differ vastly. As I said, Lafayette is a school that meets 100% of demonstrated need. So there's no gap between your estimated family contribution and what you would be, that number and the cost of attending. At some schools, your estimated contribution may be that it's estimated that you can afford to pay $20,000. The school costs $50,000, but you've only gotten $40,000 in financial aid. That's called gapping, and that happens at most schools. There are really, I bet you 30 to 50 schools across the nation that meet 100% of financial need for both domestic and international students, and we are definitely one of them. So know that also within financial aid, especially as you're looking at year 2, if there's been a change in terms of the package, that you can file an appeal. So it is not uncommon for financial aid appeals to be filed. So I wanted you to know that as well. So, how do you pay for the next year? Scholarships, right? Scholarships. So be mindful of what the small print says for the scholarships. A lot of outside scholarships will only be for 1 year. They're usually just for tuition, but not always. So look at the small print to see what kind of independent scholarship is being offered. And then there are schools who have scholarships, and those are going to vary vastly as well. So at Lafayette, for example, we have merit scholarships of $10,000, $15,000, and $20,000. Those are actually called merit awards. And then we have half tuition scholarships and full tuition scholarships. And a number of students get each of those. So do you keep that scholarship for all 4 years at Lafayette? Yes, you do. And at many, many schools, those institutional scholarships are kept for all 4 years, provided that the student is meeting the minimum GPA requirement set forth in that scholarship. So be aware of what that is. At Lafayette, for example, it's a 3.0. So as long as a student maintains a 3.0, then the scholarship continues. There is an appeal process also if you dip just a little below that at almost all schools. So for paying for the next year, definitely scholarships should continue. And best goals, is your scholarship for all 4 years if she gets it? And at most schools, the answer is going to be yes. So wanted you to know that. So let's say your student didn't get a scholarship, or you're looking at different change in finances such that your contribution got bigger. So how do you help pay for college? Well, one big savings that the student can help with is the student can apply for and receive a job as a resident assistant. A resident assistant, as you can see here, this is the guy helping the students out here. He or she or they is somebody who lives in the residence hall, puts on some programs for students, is the go-to person, also kind of a counseling role goes along with that. In exchange for which it varies at schools, but it is almost always free room and often free board, or a portion of the board is covered. So that can be a significant savings, somewhere around, depending on the school, that can be a value of $10,000 to $15,000 a year. Some schools you can't apply to be a resident assistant until you're a junior. Other schools, such as Lafayette, you can apply as a sophomore. Or you apply and you can do it as a sophomore. So wanted you to know that is a big way to save a lot of money, so that you're not paying that and the next year because your student is earning it. There are also on-campus jobs, and many students, as part of their financial aid package, will get an assistance to have within their work study within their package. Even if you don't get work study, students can have on-campus jobs. Those jobs, however, are jobs where the student is earning money and that money is going to the student. So it is not helping to offset the cost of tuition and room and board. So wanted you to be aware of that. And also there's always questions, I think, about, well, what is the advantage to getting work study? If a student is given work study, then up to $1,000 or $2,000, depending on the school's package, that means that when you apply for financial aid the next year, the money earned through work study is not counted in doing the calculation based on yours as parents and students as students tax returns. So it's almost like it's a pass, which is great because, in other words, that money that is earned through work study is not counted in terms of what was earned the prior year. So that can be quite nice. Also, students may do internships in the summer, and those can be quite high paying, $3,000 to $4,000 a month, depending on the industry. So that's another way, although it's not paying per se for the tuition, room and board, it is another way for students to earn money to pay for that. In addition, there are co-op schools out there that require you to take a semester or 7 months, depending on the school, to do a co-op. So some schools that come to mind for that, Northeastern is a co-op school, Drexel is a co-op school, University of the Pacific, so just down the road from Elk Grove in Stockton, they are they have that for engineering, where you take off 7 months to do a co-op job for that. So I wanted you to think about that. One of the things when evaluating the value of a co-op is taking a look at, well, what's the cost for me based on delaying perhaps graduation, over the long-term earning life of the student. For some, it can be negligible. For others, it can be significant depending on one's major. So something to consider. Another way of talking about jobs to pay is, ROTC and National Guard. They are great ways for students to pay for school. So ROTC is, they have there's Navy, there's Army, there's Air Force. Marines are part of the Navy. So Lafayette, for example, is an ROTC Army school. That means the students take ROTC classes on campus, and we are the battalion area. So there'll be other colleges who take their classes at Lafayette, but the students at Lafayette, they don't have to go anywhere else. They do their training with us. ROTC is paying them to go to college. At some schools, that first semester with ROTC is not covered, or that first year, room and board is not covered by ROTC. Lafayette will provide a grant to students who get the ROTC scholarship to cover the room and board. But it's a great way to pay for school. Same with National Guard, which is weekend duties that you have while you're going to school, and they will cover, they'll cover the cost of attendance. So definitely that's a great way to pay for college and beyond. And you have jobs guaranteed with ROTC, and you can make decisions with the National Guard about how you're going to fulfill your service, whether that's going to be in the reserves or whether you're going to go active service. So wanted you to think about that. I think we don't often think that ROTC pays for college, but it certainly can. The other thing, of course, are loans, and there are all sorts of loans, Parent Plus loans, loans that you can take out on your own. But I also wanted to talk to you about something that's come into vogue and is rather a nice way to pay for college beyond that first year, and that's called an income share agreement. So an income share agreement means, and I've put up Stride funding here. In full disclosure, I know the young man who is the VP of Stride because he's a Lafayette grad and a friend of my daughter's. So my daughter went to Lafayette. So, Dave, his name is Dave Kafafian. So if you ever want to be put in touch with him, I'd be happy to put you in touch with him. But Dave was a government and law and econ major at Lafayette, worked for IBM Consulting for 3 years, then went to Harvard Law School, went to JP Morgan and did mergers and acquisitions, but his passion was always this idea of making college accessible to everyone. So he, along with another Harvard student and some other people, obviously it's a company, work for Stride Funding. And it is a company that provides income sharing. They only do it for the junior and senior year and for grad programs. Other companies besides Stride may do it for all 4 years. But essentially the agreement is that whatever money they fund and they front end the cost of those last 2 years, you then pay back over the course of a certain period at a certain percentage your salary. So for some students, it can be a really great option. No cosigner is required. Also, if you fall below a certain income, then you're not required to pay for that time when you're under a certain income. So just know that it's a great option that a lot of people don't know about, which is why I wanted to make sure that you knew about income share agreements and in particular Stride funding because Dave's an ethical guy, and so I felt comfortable talking about his company. So I want to stop sharing here and get to questions in the chat box. I'm not seeing any right now, so please, I know this wasn't a very long presentation on my part, but you may have a myriad of questions, but this was not going to take up 45 minutes. So wanted to provide you an overview and then give you an opportunity to ask any questions, financial aid related, scholarship related, how to pay for those years beyond year one related, and I'm happy to help you in any way possible. And in the meantime, I will put my contact information in the chat box should you need it after this presentation. Do that while you're hopefully putting your questions in. I have a question here from our co-host who's also in this industry. Did you mention that some schools have work study, but some schools let students get a job on campus that they can pay with tuition. I'm not aware, Brianna, and maybe your prior school had this, of any school that allows you to work on campus to that money then goes to pay for your tuition. It goes into a student's pocket and it could be applied by that student to the next semesters, or next years because they're earning money, but I'm not aware, and maybe I'm in error, of any school that would allow you to work and not give the student the money, but would apply it to their bill. The student would have to take the money and apply it to the bill, as far as I know.
Yeah, so at the previous institution I worked for, I used to work at a college, students who had jobs on campus, they didn't have to be work study students, it could be any student, and they had the choice of whether they wanted their paycheck to go towards their bill or into their pocket.
Oh, that's awesome. Great to know. So I did not know that. So I've never worked at a school. I've worked at a few where that was an option. So that's terrific to know as well, because they're not earning a ton of money, but every little bit helps for sure. Other questions? You'll have some. Brianna, did I miss anything that you think I should be discussing here? Because happy to have you join in, and appreciate you doing so on the other topic, that you can actually apply it to your bill. So I'll wait a few minutes. Also, because I'm not sure whether you all know about this while you're hopefully typing some questions, when you get financial aid packages, it's really important for you to know what you're comparing. And so, for example, some schools will put in into a package $5,500 in loans. And those will be a subsidized loan of $3,500. And the subsidized loan means you're not paying the interest on that until after the student has graduated, or if the student for some reason stops going to college, then they would have to start. But an unsubsidized loan means the interest accrues right away. Some schools put both in. So we, for example, do not. We put only the subsidized loan in, the one that you don't have to have a payment until you graduate. And so you can take out the other loan, but to help pay for the cost. But know that when you're looking at financial aid packages. So
I have some questions. Yeah. Can you please talk more about stridefunding.com?
Sure, I can do that. So Stride Funding is a company so here's, again, how it works is they will take a look at the student's major, and they do an analysis of what the average starting salary is for that particular student in that particular major. They're making the assumption that the student is getting a job doing that. There's a contract that is signed, and then the student signs that, and then what gets taken out of their paycheck is the percentage that they have agreed they will pay StriveScan of what they're earning. So StriveScan completely front ends those last 2 years. With the understanding that you're going to be giving them a percentage of your income for a fixed sum. And so the best way to find out more about Stride Funding is to get in touch with them. If you need me to put the slide up again, I'm happy to do that, and to see what that means for your student, because they would be happy to talk to you and walk you through that. I am not an expert at it, so I don't want to misspeak or mislead. I only know how it works in general, not the specifics based on the algorithms that they've figured out for salaries, etc. But it's a really great option, for the student to pay for his or her education, rather than you as a parent, for example, to take on that kind of potential debt. Yes. Hi, Colton. Yes, we did. There will be a recap of this presentation, both live, so you can hit it on StriveScan. I am also, because we have a lot of extra time, happy to go over anything again with you, if that's what you would like. Not sure how many folks are on here, but yeah, but definitely the presentation is being recorded, and you can look at it asynchronously, so that at your leisure. When did you come into the presentation? What time was it? So I can kind of gauge, or what was I talking about at the time?
Kathleen, I have a question for you
Sure.
that maybe some people are wondering about while Colton puts in his answer or their answer. Is a lot of parents are wondering if, you know, residency status matters and how that would affect paying for college and if it's relevant or not for various institutions.
That's a great question. So residency does matter at public schools. So one way to, you know, there's a thing called a WUI, which is the Western exchange. So a number of schools in the West kind of have decided that, and it's different for all the different schools, but that you as a Californian may be able to go to school in Alaska or in Idaho or in Utah at 1.5 times the rate of what an in-state student would pay. I think the only UC that does that in reverse is UC Merced, but it is a great way also to save money. It doesn't necessarily go towards paying for years that's beyond the second year because you would get that right from the beginning. Private schools do not, the cost of attending a private school is not based on residency. So the price is the same for everyone, at least in theory, in sticker price, but not necessarily in terms of merit awards or financial aid awards, kind of depending on how much your estimated family contribution is. So definitely for public schools, residency can matter. And you may be able to establish residency in some states, not all. So definitely look into that when you're looking at going to an out-of-state public school to see what are the residency requirements for that state. That may be a great way and a great question, Brianna, thank you, for you to cut down the cost of attendance in years 2, 3, or 4. So great question for sure. Okay. Other questions?
Colton came in about halfway through.
That's what it looked like. So yeah, so Colton, it'd probably just be easier for you to get to take my contact information. I'm happy to talk to you directly, but rather than repeat it all since it's being recorded for others, I will, and I'll put this in the chat box one more time in case you came in after that. I'm happy to speak to you about this, so you can just give me a buzz. Any other questions that I can answer? Brianna, you've been awesome in helping facilitate this program. If you have,
yeah, I'll ask another one because we are with California parents and students here. And so, right, you know, there is a general misconception that going to college out of state will cost more than going to college in state. And I know that a lot of private institutions can be financially competitive with the UC system. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So please, please, please do not make the assumption that that going to an out-of-state school, particularly a private out-of-state school, is going to be more expensive. You know, there are a number of schools who have lots of money for financial aid and lots of money for scholarships. So we could most assuredly be less than a UC for many, many, many students, and you should know that. And we are not. There are going to be a number of schools where that is true. So definitely think more broadly, and don't think that it's just the CSUs or the UCs. One thing I will tell you, however, is in looking, if you're thinking, I'm going to stay at a community college and save money those first 2 years, you may save money by doing that for sure, but the opportunity for scholarships is much more limited for transfer students. So it can quite literally, depending on your financial circumstance, be less expensive for you to go to a private out-of-state school as a first-year student than it would be to go to a community college for 2 years and then to go to a UC or a school, a private school. So I want you to know that. Also, if you are a Pell Grant recipient or think you will be, I certainly could not have gone to college without the Pell Grant. I was a California first generation kid. But schools like Lafayette, you don't take that Pell Grant with you when you go out of state to any out of state school. But a school like Lafayette makes up with its own grants that Pell Grant. If you were Pell Grant eligible, you're going to get from Lafayette a grant that covers what you would have gotten as a Pell Grant recipient. And the Pell Grant comes from the federal government. So that's how that works, and would be part of a financial aid package. But definitely, and there are schools where, depending on this, where the school has set the adjusted gross income, there may not be any loans in your package. So the average debt load of a student coming out of Lafayette, for example, is about $18,000, not per year, over 4 years. And so definitely there's self-help in the form of loans in ours and work study in most, but not all of our packages. But it's, it's the debt load, because the cost of attendance of Lafayette, if you looked at the sticker price, tuition and room and board runs about $70,000. Then you add in, indirect costs. We package at looking at a cost thinking it's going to be about 75. So that's what our financial aid people use. But those indirect costs that you incur as a parent to send your kid, student, sorry, shouldn't have said kid, your child, your young adult to college, travel expenses, books, pocket money, those kinds of things. Those you don't pay to the school, but we still include that in our calculation of what the cost of attendance would be. And those are called indirect costs. So that's how that works. But no,
it's awesome.
You have to be a lot less expensive.
Yeah, and just so you all know, the average indebtedness for a student in the United States when they graduate is about $40,000. So what Kathleen was sharing on that is pretty significant to know. Do you want me to keep asking you questions, Kathleen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, my next question is, if a family doesn't think they will qualify for need-based financial aid, should they still fill out the FAFSA?
So yes, and here's, in my opinion, yes. And here's why. Sometimes things change. Sadly, COVID changed a lot of things. People lost jobs. And so when sometimes primary breadwinners in a family lose a job, pass away, all sorts of things. Well, when that happens, that is a very sad and stressful time. And so the last thing you want to be doing is filling out the FAFSA or the CSS profile if the school requires both, as Lafayette does, in that stressful time. So I think it's better to have filled out, at least as a minimum, the FAFSA beforehand. In addition, I think it's important, this is me personally as a mom, this is not Lafayette's policy, it's Kathleen Williams' mom's policy. I think it's a good thing for a student to have some skin in the game. And so those, the subsidized and unsubsidized loans of $3,500 and $2,000, for example, are taken out in the student's name. It's not a bad thing for a student to have that. So even if you think you don't qualify for financial aid, a student could at a minimum get an unsubsidized student loan of $2,000 and then is invested in his, her, or their education.
Awesome. I think I have one more question for you. So
you are awesome.
So for a lot of colleges require the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and some require even more documents than that. Like tax returns and things like that. And it's kind of annoying for families. But specifically for California families, how is that beneficial?
It's absolutely beneficial to be a CSS profile school because the cost, we know, you have to upload those documents for us to both custodial and non-custodial parent if there's a divorce situation, unless you get a waiver because you don't know where the non-custodial parent is. But the advantage is that the cost of your living, including if you have a mortgage, is taken into consideration. The value of your house gets capped at a certain amount of your income, all of which is helpful to high income states. So it really, for Californians, looking at schools that require the CSS profile can actually provide you a much better deal with regard to financial aid than those who just require the FAFSA, because income is so much higher, but FAFSA does not take into consideration the cost of living in California. So great question.
Yeah, you are getting some questions from the audience. So Manmeet Singh wants to know if grants are the same as scholarships.
No, they're not. So great question. A grant is money that the school is giving you as part of a financial aid package. A scholarship is a merit scholarship or an ROT, depending on what the scholarship is, right? Whether it's an athletic scholarship, an ROTC, but let's just talk about a merit scholarship, for example. That is merit, and that is different from a grant. So a grant is what you get for financial aid purposes. A merit scholarship is what the student received from the school based on a review of that application and feeling as if the student was really awesome. And would, obviously if you're giving out merit scholarships, you want those students to come to your school. So they are different.
Great. Amanda Lamb, I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit just to help Kathleen out. I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you just explain, in a financial aid award letter, all the different line items that are going to be on there for costs for families, and then the financial aid that can be used to cover those costs in terms of scholarships, grants, loans, things like that? Like, how do they correlate to each other?
Sure. So, every school is going to calculate the cost of attendance, and that cost of attendance will be on what we now call the College Financial Planning, the CFP, College Financial Plan, and it will spell out the total, the tuition, the room and board, the any fees associated with it, and schools have fees for sure. The UCs definitely have fees, so fees. We have and a lot of schools have this. We have a one-time charge, for example. It's a matriculation charge. It only gets charged one time. That's on there. Then the next thing that you're looking at is merit. And one of the things to ask a student, ask an admissions person such as myself, is do scholarships stack on top of financial need? At most schools, the answer is no. And that's the answer at Lafayette, no, it doesn't. Merit scholarship would be the first thing that we would use because your student has earned that. We wouldn't count the outside scholarships, just our own scholarship. And then we would look at what the rest is between what your financial need is and that scholarship. And we would fill that in with grants, potentially a small loan, like I said, the subsidized loan, and potentially work study of $1,000 is usually what we do for our work study. So we'll all be laid out. Now, really important for you when you're looking at these different schools' plans, for you to be looking at what is included in this, right? So what's not included, for example, is health insurance. And depending on where you go and depending on your health, the health system that you're in now, you might have to buy the school's health insurance. And at most schools, that is a separate charge that is not included in that financial planning document. So my daughter, I think I shared with you, went to Christian Brothers High School, so just up the road from you. We went to Kaiser. Kaiser is not in Pennsylvania, so we needed to drop her from our insurance and buy her insurance through the school. All schools have insurance. So I want you to know that's usually not part of it. That these days it runs, at least at our school, around $1,600 for the insurance for the year. So that's how the financial aid package looks. And then you would see on there what your estimated family contribution is expected to be. Also, different ways to pay as you go forward. You can also set up a payment plan. All schools have the ability to have you pay 4 times a year, 5 times a year, depending on the school, and sometimes 6 times a year. So you may start paying even before your child starts college, because you've set it up so that it's not one big hit for you, but over time. So that's another way to help the blow of paying for tuition, for sure. Did I answer that, Brianna?
Yeah, I think you did. We have another question from Karen. She wants to know if you can talk about what the Pell Grant is and how you qualify for it.
Yes, so the Pell Grant is a federally subsidized grant. I think the number changes from time to time. It's around 6,000. You have to be a very high need. So in other words, I don't know what the cutoff is right off the bat, but it is unlikely. I mean, there'll be some people in California who will qualify for the Pell Grant, but it is for very low income students, very low. And so the federal government is the one who makes the decision about Pell Grant eligibility. It is not the school. In that regard, you'll also be requested to do certain things as part of financial aid because of federal requirements. So for example, there'll be a verification process. The federal government randomly chooses people who they want you to get the verification documents from. So know that if a school has sent you something saying we need you to verify, then you need to respond to that document. And it's very self-explanatory as to how to do it, and it's actually not very hard to do. So just be aware of that. It is not the school making that decision. It is the federal government making that decision as to who needs to verify. Also for young men, and now I guess, I don't know when the law, if it's changed yet, where women are going to have to be signing up for the military in case registering. That is also a federal requirement for young men. Once they turn 18, they have to fill that out as part of the documentation for the federal government through FAFSA.
Great, and we have another question from Sharon, and I think she's asking about the CSS profile and what it stands for and where you can find it on the CB website.
Okay, so I think maybe she might be asking about the college financial plan, and that's the document that it's P, not B, and that's what they send to you. Schools send to you to show you essentially the cost of attendance and the awards that you've been given, both financially and otherwise. So in other words, merit scholarships, loans, and grants, and that's on that. The CSS profile, if you just Google it, you'll find it. It's a document that's done through the College Board. So yeah, it's out there, or just any school. When you click on their website, they'll talk about those documents, and there's almost always a link. So that's easy enough also. Great questions, great facilitator. Thank you so much, Brianna. This has been very helpful.
Of course, those are all of our questions. I do just want to add, when you are comparing your financial aid awards in the spring, it's really important to not just say, school A gave us $15,000 and school B gave us $25,000. So school B is a better financial option. You really want to look at that final number of what they're expecting your family contribution to be, because each school costs a different amount. And so the amount that they are giving you it matters more what percentage of the total bill that is, and not so much what number that is. So you're really going to want to compare the different out-of-pocket costs to you and not focus so much on the scholarship amount.
Right, and that's a great point. And the other thing you need to look at is, can my child get out in 4 years? So financial aid is only good for 8 semesters. So 4 years is a really important factor. At Lafayette, for example, our student athletes graduate in 4 years at a rate of 97%. The overall, so just so that you know, a 4-year graduation rate is impacted by students not graduating on time and any student who transfers. So that can impact it as well. So we have a very high retention rate and very high graduation rate. It's, I think it's around 89, 90% will graduate in 4 years. It could be as high as 94. I should really know this. Anyway, it's high. And for our athletes is 97%. So you can see that kids are getting in and out of Lafayette, whether they're engineering students or whether they're English majors in 4 years. And they are most assuredly gainfully employed, which is another thing for you to look at is return on investment. Like who are your students? How are they getting their jobs? Are they getting their jobs? You know, the highest paid major coming out of Lafayette is computer science. To me, it's staggering that the starting salary for these students, $93,000 on average. To me, that is awesome. And as a parent, you should think awesome. That is the highest major that we have in terms of stats. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for coming today. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have other questions. Many, many thanks to Brianna, who was so great in helping me with this. So really appreciate the help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathleen. It was a great presentation, really informative. And thank you everybody for joining us and listening. When you close the window, there will be a link to a really quick 5-question survey, and we'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. We do encourage you to check the schedule and sign up for more sessions tonight. There are 3 rounds of 6x6 college fairs, so get to know a lot of really great colleges out there. And you will be able to find the sessions recording as well as all the other session recordings at strivescan.com/elk-grove. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Kathleen, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everyone.